For a very long time, I used to think that the only way to do uncomfortable or hard things like going to the gym, studying, or just getting started on something that I'd been postponing and procrastinating for a long time on is to just suck it up and do it. And while there is power to that strategy, it does have its own intrinsic limitations. For a start, it can take quite an amount of time to accumulate such potential energy in the form of frustration, disappointment, and even guilt to set things in motion. And even then, it's just not a sustainable long-term strategy. This sort of motivation never lasts over time. I'm sure you can relate that to your own experience, but even then, it can lead in disappointment, in giving up prematurely, and sometimes in rationalizing and talking your way out of it before even starting. So the snap solution to that is something called cognitive reframing. And to better understand the concept, I'm going to illustrate a story that's happened to me just recently. I was going down the road, I was going to do some shopping, and I saw a guy whom I thought was one of my friends. And I looked insistently in his direction to catch his attention for quite a while before I realized that actually he wasn't who I thought he was. And by that time, the stranger was also looking back at me, rather perplexed. Now I'm sharing this for you to relate to this and to understand that in normal circumstances, I would never stop in my tracks and look at a stranger for that amount of time. I was only able to do this because this guy was someone whom I thought I knew. And this is something that can illustrate quite simply the power of an empowering context and of cognitive reframing. Going back that day, I thought this is something that can be reverse engineered and applied to many other things. It reminded me of a concept called reframing, cognitive reframing. I'm going to explain what that is. Cognitive reframing is a psychological technique that consists of identifying and then changing the way situations, experiences, events, ideas, and emotions are viewed. This is essentially seeking to create a more empowering context, one that can support the desired action. And I remember I came across this concept a long time ago in an NLP book by Tony Robbins. It's a pretty common technique, and ever since I discovered it, I've been applying it to many other things. For example, posting these videos has been quite a challenge for me for a while before I realized that I was setting some unrealistic goals for myself, some things that I wasn't able to manage. For example, when I think of it now, I imagine an audience of 100 people in front of me, and that's something that I can manage and I can work with. This same concept I'm applying at acquiring jobs and prospective clients, and it's always got to do with the way I view myself in the moment that I'm endeavoring these actions. So for example, with any form of outreach, you can view yourself as someone who's a bit of a nuisance or distraction, discomfort to whoever they outreach to. But also you can view yourself as someone who's offering an opportunity, of someone who's giving value, of someone who's facilitating some form of exchange, and that's a more empowering story that you can tell yourself about that thing. And it's something that's applicable to pretty much anything. Texting your crush, asking for a raise, pulling the trigger on something uncomfortable, making a phone call that you've been meaning to for a long time. In fact, I'm convinced that that's exactly what's happening every time we somehow manage to go through self-imposed barriers and limitations and finally find ourselves taking the actions which we said we were going to do for a long time. Albeit unconsciously, this is what's happening in our brains. I just want you to be able to do it on demand whenever you need it, to call upon it. And in order to do this successfully, this is what you need to do. First, you need to get present to your thoughts, to whatever is going on through your head. And that's your self-dialogue. That's the one that gives away the disbelief, the self-questioning, and the self-doubt. And if you've watched this video so far, then I'm hoping that you agree with me that your thoughts are not necessarily what there is. They're just behavior patterns that have become ingrained through one reason or another. This is a question of nature versus nurture. I'm hinting on this in many of my videos, and I'm going to elaborate on this later on, but this is a fundamental presupposition that whatever thought and self-dialogue is going on behind closed curtains is not really what there is, and that therefore you can change it with some more empowering dialogue. And then the step 2 is to find a more empowering story to tell yourself. We know the importance of stories, of missions, of having a why to find a how, and this is what it comes down to, finding something that aligns with your action better and that can support you and carrying you through that desired action. The last step is to pretty much shuffle and reshuffle until something aligns, because you'll find that not just any story will click and fall into place. It has to be something that your brain is able to somehow believe and to act on. What you're doing here is essentially you're minimizing psychological friction by resolving cognitive dissonance. A lot of fancy terms for essentially saying that you're aligning your beliefs with your actions, with what you're acting out. So for example, a smoker who keeps smoking while they know that that's bad for them is either A, facing with the decision of quitting smoking, or B, rationalizing that it's not going to happen to them. So that's how we resolve cognitive dissonances and we align our actions with our thoughts. And this is what we're doing here, because the action doesn't change, but the thought process changes, the way we view the action to begin with. I'm going to end by saying that this by no means is a substitute for action. In fact, it's a means to an end. It's what you're employing to get yourself in action to begin with. And in order to give yourself the highest chances to succeed, you want to meet this somewhere down the middle. You want to facilitate your actions as well. I've discussed a lot of strategies to that extent, such as the 15-minute rule, the 2-minute rule, the do something principle, and habit bundling. There's loads of videos on YouTube discussing this. You'll find loads of tips in books like The Atomic Habits, for example. But at the end of the day, you are going to the gym, you are going to make that call, and you are going to send an uncomfortable email. And because I don't want to leave anything unexplained, the reason why this works is because each successful action creates a positive reference experience, which then becomes a feedback loop between what you said you were going to do and what you actually did. Over time, this changes your beliefs and your identity. This is the fancy way of saying that the more you go to the gym, the more you'll know that you can go to the gym when you say you'll go to the gym, and the more you'll trust your words to yourself, which will give it a sense of integrity, which will then be transferable and applicable in other areas of your life. And I think that this overall is a more complete blueprint of how lasting transformational change can be made. Bad habits curbed and procrastination eliminated, productivity increased, and so on and so forth. And I hope that you found this useful, eye-opening, and if that's so, then please consider giving a comment, a like, and a subscribe, and also sharing it with someone who you think might need it and benefit from this in their own life. In the meantime, I hope you're keeping safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.